Okay, so good afternoon once again, our esteemed guests, distinguished scholars, faculty members, students, and participants joining us both in person and virtually. It is with great honor and excitement that I welcome you all to this profound event in the Global African Lecture Series, organized by the Kwabena Nketia Center for Africana Studies. Today's discussion, titled Resurgent Pan-Africanism, Global Africa, Reparations, and a Sustainable New World Order, is not only timely, but imperative. At a juncture when global dialogue increasingly highlights equity, reparative justice, and sustainability, Pan-Africanism resurfaces as a vital framework for addressing these challenges and opportunities. This lecture series is a testament to our collective resolve to explore these critical issues deeply. Whether you are here to gain insights, ask pressing questions, or contribute to the dialogue, I invite you to embrace this opportunity to reflect on the immense potential of a truly interconnected and empowered global Africa. Once again, welcome and thank you for being a part of this momentous occasion. May this session inspire meaningful actions and profound reflections.
So before we have our introduction of our speaker by one of our students at the African University of Communications and Business, I'd like to talk a bit about the mission of the Nketia Center for Africana Studies. My name is Professor Fleming. I'm an associate professor in the School of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, and I'm also the acting director of the Kwabena Nketia Center for Africana Studies. Many of you also know me as Professor Mankutam. I'd like to first say that the Kwabena Nketia Center for Africana Studies is committed to becoming a leading center for Pan-African scholarship and collaboration, bringing together scholars and thinkers from the African world to conduct research and deliberate on issues affecting the welfare and destiny of Black people and to disseminate their findings as widely as possible. Additionally, the center will be an incubator for innovative research to generate new knowledge that advances professional practice for those at the cutting edge of transformative development. The center contributes significantly to the university's mission of, quote, preparing lifelong learners to become innovative problem solvers and ethical leaders in the fields of communications, business, and related areas through excellence in interdisciplinary teaching, research, and collaboration at the local, regional, and global levels, using a Pan-African framework, as well as to the university's core value of embracing African cultural values. The university is not merely a university in Africa with an African label. It is an African university with an ethos and the explicit intent to produce graduates who fully understand and appreciate and unapologetically manifest their Africanness or their Blackness in all spheres of their lives. The need to provide an education at the tertiary level that enhances the self-awareness of students as Africans led to the establishment in 2009 of what was then called the Center for Africana Studies at this university. The Kwabena Nketia Center for Africana Studies was officially launched on the 22nd of June in 2015 as an interdisciplinary institution dedicated to the creation and advancement of knowledge about the peoples and cultures of Africa and the African diaspora through scholarly research, teaching and publication, aimed at the regeneration of African peoples and societies. We welcome you to the Global African Diaspora Lecture Series at the Kwabena and Ketia Center for Africana Studies. Thank you very much. We lost your Zoom connection totally. So here you can just put the number for the
Once again, you are welcome to the Center of Kwabena in Ketia, a place where students are being inspired of our great presentations and discussions. And today, our topic for discussion is that Resurgent Pan-Africanism, Global Africa, Reparations, and a Sustainable New World Order. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Mario Nisbett. Mario Nisbett, Ph.D. from UC Berkeley, is a senior lecturer at the Center for African and International Studies at the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. His research focuses on the histories and politics of global Africa, highlighting connections between the continent and its diaspora. He explores themes such as Pan-African solidarity, sovereignty, post-development ideologies, Maroon studies, and reparative justice, particularly in relations to slavery, colonialism, and decolonial practice. Nisbett also investigates the intersections of Blackness and international relations, as well as the interdisciplinary nature of global African studies. His work has been published in peer-reviewed journals, including the Contemporary Journal of African Studies, and he authored The Workings of Diaspora, Jamaican Maroons and the Claims of Sovereignty 2021, published by Lexington Books. We are honored to have Dr. Nisbett here to share his knowledge and perspective with us today. His lecture, focusing on the resurgence of Pan-Africanism, the quest for reparations, and the vision of a sustainable global future, is certain to enlighten, challenge, and inspire us all. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Dr. Mario Nisbett. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for also inviting me to speak here. And I would like to thank everyone for all of the hard work in putting this talk together. So today I'm going to speak on a particular topic that I have been working on. Give me a second. So, yes, second slide, yes. So as was mentioned earlier, the topic I'll be looking at today is Resurgent Pan-Africanism, Global Africa, Reparations, and a Sustainable New Order. Next slide. So it's a potential article, maybe even a book project, so I welcome feedback. So this presentation argues that we are witnessing a resurgence of Pan-Africanism aiming at the complete liberation of all Africans and humanity from entrenched global inequality. This movement is characterized by a heightened sense of global African unity with reparative justice, both externally framed and internally driven, merging as a central axis in what could be argued, in Nkrumah's sense, a broader struggle for radical transformation of the world order. Next slide. So in terms of giving context to Pan-Africanism, our Pan-African unity, we start by looking at the pre-modern period and argue that the idea of Africans uniting has been happening from since the dawn of civilization. And we would point to ancient Egypt and other civilization in East Africa, West Africa, and other parts of the continent. The next slide. So in terms of the modern era, when we speak of the origins of Pan-Africanism, or the modern origins of Pan-Africanism, it emerged in the wake of one of the greatest of evil in human history. This was the birth of the modern era, where we had genocide, colonialism, and slavery. And when we speak of genocide in this new modern world, it started with genocide, with the Europeans committing genocide against just basically everyone on the planet. Everywhere on the planet, you had genocide perpetrated by Europeans, and in particular the Americas, the Western Hemisphere. And so when we speak of the Great Dying, we are talking about 90% of the indigenous people were wiped out in the Americas through genocide with European expansion. So we also have the situation of colonialism, where we have colonialism impacting, especially when we think of the Americas, just about every single nation in the Americas were founded by white supremacists. These were people who believed that Africans were not human and other people of color were subhumans. And so we have the foundation of just about every state. Maybe we could argue Haiti took a different path, but just about every state that we have in the Americas, even on the African continent, just about every state, also in Asia, also in Europe, were founded by white supremacists. And so we have to keep that in mind when we think about the emergence of this so-called modern era. And then we have slavery, which create a situation where we had slavery on the planet, and many people enslaved other people throughout the world. But what was unique in this modern era was that slavery dehumanized a grouping of people. This was a grouping of an entire grouping of people, African people all over the world, were considered subhuman and non-human in this new global order that emerged during this time period. But this time period also caused the emergence and growth of Pan-Africanism. And I would argue that Pan-Africanism in a modern sense came about during the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. So when Africans were placed in dungeons, when Africans were placed in barracoons, when Africans were placed in ships off the coast of Africa, they decided, as Professor Horace Campbell argued, that they should develop a contact that is beyond the village, that they should unite and come together, even at the slave coast and the slave castles on the continent, to unite and fight this emerging inequality that they would face. So we place the origins of Pan-Africanism, modern Pan-Africanism, not so much all in the diaspora, but also on the African continent itself. Then we go to the next slide, where we see a surge in Pan-Africanism. And this is often overlooked in history in terms of the Haitian Revolution. So the Haitian Revolution was the beginning of the end of state-sanctioned slavery. So during this time period, all over the world, forms of servitude exist everywhere. And the particular form of slavery, chattel slavery, existed in the Americas, with African people being the main victims. So Haiti was the first place. Oftentimes the British likes to go around the world, and people have a joke that if slavery didn't exist, the British would have invented it just so that they could say they ended it. But the British was not the first people to end slavery or start a drive for the end of slavery. It was Africans, and these were Africans located in Haiti. Most of the Africans involved in this rebellion were born on the continent, but when they came to Haiti in the Caribbean, they set up a system to make sure that slavery doesn't exist on Haiti and also the neighboring country of the Dominican Republic, and any human being that came to the soil of Haiti would be free. There was no place in the world where that existed until the Haitian people, the African people created it. So it was a surge in Pan-Africanism in the sense of really transforming a system that everyone thought could never be abolished, but the Haitians did. But also during this time period, we have also the Industrial Revolution, the expansion of the capitalism and the era of heightened capacity to place destruction on the world. So during this time period also, we see Europe emerge with a system that they would argue themselves, if we don't do something about it in the next 100 or 200 years, there will be no earth for us to live on. They actually created a system that is leading to the destruction of humanity. And some of them, most of them are aware of it, and they're giving speeches and fake lectures about attempts to end it, while they have some others who don't even believe that they're destroying the planet. But these things emerged during this time period. Then once again, we had another surge of Pan-Africanism with organizations like the UNIA, with Marcus Garvey and Amy Jack Garvey as two of the main leaders. And this organization had up to 4 million members across dozens of countries. So it was the largest movement of Africans up to this point period in terms of mass mobilization and organization. So we had chapters not only in Jamaica, in the United States, but also here in the Gold Coast at the time, called the Gold Coast, but also in different places in West, Central, and Southern Africa. But also too, this time period was a time period where we had World War I. And this is named World War I, and this was a world war where the European, once again, actively engaged on the planet and had war throughout the whole planet, fighting over resources and exploitation of the planet. So we see these surge of Pan-Africanism also challenging moments of change or instability. Then when we go to the next slide, we have surge of Pan-Africanism during the decolonization period. So we also have the civil rights movement, Black Power, and the different movements during this time period. But we also have World War II, where once again, Europeans introduced war on a global scale. And once again, they were fighting over resources to exploit the planet. And so that's what that war was about. So we go to the next slide, and we have a surge of Pan-Africanism again. We could say anti-apartheid. And so this coincides with the end of the so-called Cold War. Cold, and I forget to add the war there, but the end of the Cold War. So this caused a shift in the world. Then we go today, so which my lectures focuses on. Today we see a resurgence of Pan-Africanism. So Pan-Africanism have wax and wane, ebb and flow. And so today we are seeing a new resurgence of Pan-Africanism. And we see this also occurring also too at the rise of BRICS nation and also in a multipolar world. So I'll elaborate on this. So today, in terms of the shift, so when we speak of the BRIC nation, the next slide please. When we speak of the BRICS nation, we are speaking about Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And in 2000, the G7, which include the major Western states, accounted for approximately 43% of the world GDP, while the BRIC nations at that time had just about 21%. By 2024, these figures shift significantly, with the G7 share decline to 30% and the BRICS country share rise to nearly 35%. So we are at a period of time where there is a major shift in the global system, where for 500 years, the European were so-called leader in the global system, and they used their leadership in the global system to exploit and draw resources from the planet. And their methods of gaining wealth was through, as we mentioned, through genocide, through slavery and colonialism. As Frantz Fanon once said, the European say man everywhere, but everywhere he found man on earth, he slaughters them. So we created a system, the West, we created a system on earth with West taking the leadership in terms of this exploitation. But their means of exploiting the planet and economic growth is declining to this new force that is emerging. And so with this new force that is emerging, it creating a great global shift where previously before, especially after 1945, the United States became the dominant power in the world, and it created a global order. Although it professed supporting democracy and equality, it uses its influence to actually oppress, exploit, and undermine humanity, the development of humanity during this time period. And even though we had the Soviet Union, which was influential at this time, it couldn't compare to the wealth that the West had at that time, in particular the United States. But this is changing. So in the next 5 to 10 years, China is projected to surpass the United States in terms of economic wealth. And so these shifts are causing havoc in different parts of the world, and we see this in the United States. When we look at the United States and the Trump administration and what is happening in the United States, what is happening in Europe, when we speak about the war in Europe and we speak of Ukraine, we see this conflict emerging in Europe. And this has to do with the global shift or the global emergence of a multipolar world where it's not just a unipolar world with the United States and the West leading, but it's a world where they're having different forces emerging, trying to reshape the planet and trying to reshape the world. So the next slide. So in terms of the 3 points that I am focusing on this presentation, global Africa. So there's a moving shift towards global Africa. This is the emergence of global Africa. The idea of global Africa refers to Africa and the African diaspora as one united unit. Not Africa and the diaspora, but Africa and the diaspora as one unit. And so this concept is starting to be used more and more, especially in the 21st century. So we see this emerging in terms of on the continent itself. So maybe before the 21st century, they had about 10, 15 countries on the continent out of the 55 that had a diaspora office or a diaspora program. Now today, just about all 55 of the countries on the continent have a diaspora program or a diaspora office. Whether it's Ghana, Nigeria, Congo, you name it, they have an office that actually directly engages the diaspora, whether it's their diaspora, but also to the wider African diaspora. This is something new, something that has emerged during the 24th century. So we also have the emergence of the African Union, which was previously the Organization of African Unity. It's now the African Union, and the diaspora was very influential in the emergence of the African Union. Previously, the Organization of African Unity didn't even really recognize the diaspora. But the African Union not only recognized the diaspora as the sixth region, it also has a diaspora office with different officials directly trying to engage the African diaspora in different parts of the world. So this is something new in the 21st century in terms of the emergence of global Africa. But you also have different initiatives in Nigeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and especially Ghana. So we have places like Burkina Faso, where Burkina Faso recently extended its hands to invite people in the diaspora to become citizens of Burkina Faso and contribute to Burkina Faso development. So we have this in different African countries, but Ghana is also a leader in this, in terms of, we had, for example, the Joseph Project in 2007. We also have the Year of Return in 2019. We have Beyond the Return, 2020. Then we have citizenship rights given to the diaspora in 2016, 2019, 2022, and 2024. And I've heard that the present administration is also working on initiatives to expand the engagement with the diaspora. So this is not only the Ghana, but you also have similar projects happening in other diaspora countries. So you see the growth of the African diaspora in this 21st century as we are going through this resurgence of Pan-Africanism and this shift to the multipolar world. So if we also go to the next slide, briefly, we look now at reparative justice, reparations, but I prefer the concept of reparative justice. So oftentimes when people think of reparative justice or reparations, one, they think it's looking for aid or begging for money. But I think reparations is actually the opposite of begging for money, and it is the opposite of aid. Aid, I think, is an insult in many instances, how it's used in the modern world. Reparations is something completely different. But before I go into reparations, I want to also mention that they have movements of reparations has been going back for at least, going back to the 18th century. So one of the first person who actually asked for reparation, demanded reparations, was a woman named Belinda Sutton. Belinda Sutton was born in the Gold Coast in the early 1700s, and she was enslaved in the Americas. And during the American Revolution, she was enslaved by some planters. And the planters during the American Revolution sided with the British. And after the American Revolution, of course, the British lost and America gained its independence. So Belinda actually sued her farmer masters, brought the claim to the government against her farmer owners, who at that time fled the country and went back to the UK, sued for reparations for almost 50 years of enslavement. And she won a reparation for at least the first year, and she fought for it the second year and for the third year. But the whole point is to make the argument that Africans have been fighting for reparations, and Africans have gotten reparations going back even as far as 1783. And we could see the same thing in the 19th century, the 20th century, and in the 21st century. So the last case of reparations was actually 2022 in the United States, if we look at the United States, where it was in Evanston, Illinois, where Africans got $25,000 each for housing in terms of issues of reparation. But the whole point is that Africans have been able to win reparations in the past, and this has happened not only in the United States, but if we look at Kenya in 2013, then we look at Namibia in 2021, we look at Ethiopia in 2021 and 2022, We could look at Nigeria in 2022 and look at Grenada in 2023. So these are cases where Africans have won reparations, but these were in individual nations where Africans were able to win these forms of reparations. If we go to the next slide, we see in terms of resurgence of Pan-Africanism, where we see reparative justice taking a more Pan-African turn. So previously they had these movements were isolated and separate stream of fighting for reparations, but now it's coming together as a Pan-African force where Africans are uniting together and demanding reparations. So we had Reparations Summit in 2015 in the United States. Then in Accra, we also had a summit, an Accra Summit in 2022. Then 2023, which I had the opportunity to attend, we had the Accra Reparations Conference in 2023, and then the Global Reparation Fund was created that same year for Africans to unite as a group to fight for reparations for the global African family. So there also is a shift in terms of what reparation is demanded in this African turn, our Pan-African turn. It's beyond money in the sense that reparations aligns with the United Nations definition of what reparations is. So United Nations define reparations as it encompasses not only monetary compensation, but restitution, including returns of African entities or artifacts, acknowledgement of historical wrongs, and institutional safeguard to make sure it doesn't happen again. And it comes with much more things than just monetary compensation. It's now crafted in a way that is intended to transform the international order, going back to the foundational moment in the early modern period in attempt to preserve African and wider humanity. So when we speak of reparations, we are speaking of something that was unjust, and that was done and was unjust. So when we speak of reparations, it's the example that I like to give sometime is if I'm at a table eating and someone is at a table eating, and say I stepped out and went to the bathroom and I came back and my plate of food was overthrown, and the person who was sitting next to me did it. I don't know the person, they overthrew my food. So in terms of reparation is saying, one, this person overturned my food. I am asking the person to address the issue, injustice that is being done. So there's many ways that the injustice could be done. The person could apologize and say they are sorry for what they did. And I could say it's okay. And maybe if I'm wealthy, I could say I could just get another set of food. But at the same time, the person who turned over my plate of food should consider, one, they either buy me a new plate of food, or the generous and humane thing to do would to offer his plate of food to me to compensate me for what was lost. But here we have a situation in the world where Europeans have gained and maintained their global dominance through what we mentioned, genocide. So the site of genocide is a place where I was also from, in the Caribbean, where the indigenous people were completely wiped out in parts of the Caribbean. You also have the situation where you built your wealth, and the industrial revolution that emerged was done through the process of the transatlantic slave trade. So these injustices was done. So when we talk about reparations, we are saying the injustice that was done, should we go back to the foundation of that injustice? And that wrong must be right from not only in the past, and the demand for reparation is continuous, where even today, if you commit an injustice, We want the message or the understanding of the world. If you commit an injustice today, you will have to pay for it sometime, either now or in the future. So when we demand reparations, we are demanding for it in the past, no matter how far back it goes. We are demanding it for today. And we are also sending a message. If you intend to do injustice in the future, we will demand reparations for when you do it, and you will have to go back to the past and also correct it. So the demand for reparation is beyond monetary compensation. In other words, if we talk about reparations here in Ghana, one, Ghana was colonized, and Ghana economy was structured to produce raw materials. So reparations could be in terms of monetary compensation, but also we have the situation where I often tell my students where cocoa, when Ghana wants to sell cocoa, the West says the global market dictate the price, but it's really the West dictate the price. They tell Africans how much they would sell the cocoa, how much they can sell the cocoa to Europe. So imagine we go to the market and we go and we tell the market woman how much we'll buy her food for. That's the kind of world that we live in, where the West tell us how much they would buy our raw resources for. So when we talk about reparations, we are not talking about monetary reparation, because if we get reparation in terms of monetary means, you get the money, but also to the money goes back to where it comes from, because the global system remains the same. When we talk about reparation, we're talking about we want means so that we could industrialize or at least find ways of dictating the price of the cocoa in the global market, instead of bringing aid in terms of funding this and funding that. We just want to make sure we have control over all our resources. The gold that we have here in Ghana, the oil that we have here in Ghana, who controls it, who owns it, is the question. And so reparations is also making sure that the system of inequality is transformed and changed. So if we go to the other slide, this is an example of form of reparations. So CARICOM, which is one of the leading force of reparations, have a 10-point scheme in terms of what they demanded for reparations. So part of it is full apology, and not the insincere apology that the Europeans often give. It's real apology. And this apology includes a conversation or discussion about what was done. So if you look at reparation, especially with, people say reparation is not practical, but reparation is very much practical. If we look at, for example, the Jewish people today. The Jewish people, most of them that experienced the Holocaust during World War II, they're not alive, they are dead. Most of them are dead. Very few of them are still living today. But to this very day as we speak, Germany is paying reparations to the Jews. And the reparations that they get is not only in money, but it's also in technology transfer. So when it comes to technology transfer, knowledge, and trade, they make sure that they're able to provide those things. But also when we talk about reparations too, in Germany, every school has to teach basically every school in Germany has to teach their children about what the Germans did to the Jews, the crime that they committed. And so when we talk about reparations, it's not just about monetary compensation, but also for the people to be aware of the crime that their ancestors committed. So when we talk about reparations, we're not talking about the effect only on the Africans. Because the leader of Dutch, he recently apologized for reparations, and he said he see how negatively the trade slave affected Africans. But he also have to talk about how, quote unquote, positively the trade slave had affected his nation. Because some of the wealthiest people in his nation are part of the slave families that gain wealth from that system. So the effect of that inequality is with them today. And it's still in Europe today, and it's with them in terms of the resources that they have. So when we talk about reparations, it's addressing those issues too. So I'm not going to go through all of the points, but this is one example, a model of some of the things in terms of looking for reparations. So part of the plan in terms of reparations, Africans were taken from the continent, over 12 million, and they have over 100 million descendants. If Europe really believe in righting the wrongs, they also have to contribute in terms of repatriation for those who want to return to the continent, because they took Africans from the continent and then turn around, colonize the continent, and exploit its resources. So I won't go through all the points. I'll go to the last major point. The next slide, please, in terms of sustainable world. So I talked a bit about how the European created an unsustainable world. So literally, they created an unsustainable world, but yet, if you hear the language coming from the United States, it acts as if it's the beacon of justice, of equality. But one example, I put Jeff Bezos here. Jeff Bezos is a good example. He's the third richest man in the world. He has a company called Amazon. And he's the third richest man in the world, and he has so much money, he would never ever be able to use it all, spend it all. And he'll die leaving that money behind. But he has workers that are unable to have a living wage. He has workers that cannot pay their rent and buy food. What kind of world what kind of beacon of democracy and justice create institutions and systems that allow a human being to have so much money that they cannot use it, but yet justifiably force people to work for him and they cannot even live or survive? That's the kind of world order that the West has created and the United States have pushed. And so this world order is crumbling and changing, and Africa is at the center of this injustice and inequality. And so the United States, as I also mentioned to my students, the United States represents about 4 to 5% of the world population, but the United States use about 20% of the Earth's resources. So that tells us if everyone on the planet wants to live like the United States, we would need 4 or 5 more planets to extract resources from and exploit in order to live like the United States. So this is the world that they created a world where only certain people can live a certain lifestyle, while the masses of humanity has to suffer. So with this new shift of the multipolar world, it creates opportunity for us to create a new world where it is much more sustainable. But one thing that we have to talk about too is our ideas of development that comes from the West. Our ideas of development often focus on the latest technology that we have and how we're able to do certain things. But really, our ideas of development should be centered on how we live together and how we are able to live with our environment. That's how our ancestors lived. That's how indigenous community lived. They live in a way that was in harmony with the environment. And so we need to create a transformation that lives with the planet, not see it as something to be exploited and used. And so when we think of, for example, the use of land, where we get from the Jamaican Maroons, where we get from Ghana in terms of indigenous community, is the land belongs to the living, it belongs to the ancestors, and it belongs to future generations. So when we think about mining and doing all of these different things to the planet, we have to think about how it impacts our ancestors, or how our ancestors would view it. We have to look at how it impacts the people who are living today. And we also have to look at how it impacts our children and our children's children in terms of the future. And so we need to create a world that is different, and this particular time, juncture in time, we see a resurgence of Pan-Africanism is a time for change. The next slide, on my concluding slide, I conclude here, and I'll end and have a sign of the Sahel states. I'll end that the resurgence of Pan-Africanism is here, and it's a time where we are seeing the emergence of a multipolar world. It's a time where we are seeing that the West is declining in terms of its influence and wealth, and this would beckon a great transformation, a change in humanity. But we as Africans have to also reassert ourselves in this new order and not become a place where people extract resources. And I end my presentation here, and I thank you for indulging me, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas.
Let's give Dr. Nisbett another round of applause for a wonderful and informative presentation. I think our students as well as guests greatly appreciate what you've shared with us so far, and I'm hoping that we can have a lively discussion hereafter. Would anyone like to start with a question or comment, observation with Dr. Nisbett? I have some questions that I've written down, but I always try to wait until the conversation is flowing. Sometimes they cover my questions, so I don't even have to ask. But who would like to start? Or should I start today? I should start today. Okay. So I'll start with the first question I wrote. Dr. Nisbett, my question is rather simple. If I can find it here. That's my second question. So I'll go ahead and ask, maybe it's my second question. You mentioned the Accra Reparations Conference of 2023. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the Accra Reparations Conference of 2023 taking place at a luxury hotel? Well, I was also in attendance, but I'm wondering, what do you think about that?
Actually, good question. Yes, I think that it could have been perhaps a more traditional place that was more embracing of African tradition values, and thought would have perhaps been more ideal in terms of the location of the conference. But I thought it was, so the conference was funded, one of the funders of the conference were also some European organizations, such as I think the Open Society and some other places. So I think that influenced perhaps the location of the conference. But also, to what was curious to me is, I'm also interested in why certain European institutions are also interested in supporting reparations. But that's something I've been thinking about too.
Thank you very much. Anyone want to follow up with a question? Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So you made mention about Ghanaians taking the products up to the market, and then they determine the price they will give us. So I want to ask, as preparation is ongoing or in process, is there any initiative that's going to change the narrative of they determine the price they are going to give us, or there's none?
To be honest with you, I mean, my experience of studying European American history is that they will not give up anything willingly. I've never seen them done it. Even when they give up something, it's often to get something else. I'm not saying that they don't have individuals in the West that are not progressive and good. I think there are many. But when it comes to their governments and institutions, they don't do anything unless they get something from it. So even when for example, USAID is being talked about and it's being cut, USAID is an organization that was put together to basically exploit countries. That organization, USAID, no organization like that would ever exist in the United States coming from another country. They would never do that. Because that organization give information to the CIA, give information to different organizations in the United States. When they have bills that are introduced to Ghana, they give information and even pay people off to change certain bills. So if Ghana want to produce a bill to say, perhaps we won't, in terms of changing these trade relations, something like the USAID would be used to make sure certain legislation don't go into play that Ghana try to dictate its price of cocoa. So they won't give up anything, but this is where unity, I think, and Pan-Africanism play a role. African, and I mentioned this to my students, Ghana, the economy of Ghana is about $77 billion. The economy of the United States, I think the last time I checked was about $25 trillion. So the economy of all of the African countries put together, 55 countries put together, is about the size of California, the economy of California. United States have 50 states. Its largest state is California, but all 55 countries. So when you think of Ghana and its economy in relations to the United States, if 55 countries on the continent is only the size of, so in terms of Ghana influence on the global system, is less than 0.1% in the global system. So when Ghana tried to change or shift anything, and it going up against global powers like the US and the European Union, it's very difficult. And this is where unity comes in. So where unity comes in and Pan-Africanism comes in, because individual nations won't be able to change the global system much, especially how it's structured and the role Africa play in that global system. So people usually say Europe brought Africa into the international market. It couldn't be furthest from the truth. Africa was always in the international market. Africa was in the international market before European was. And Europeans know that. But they teach that. And they teach that, and also they teach that to themselves, and they teach that to other parts of the world. So when colonialism came about in Africa, Ghana, gold was leaving Ghana, especially the Bono region, going to Mali, going to Europe. In the Middle Ages, gold was coming from Ghana going to Europe. You had West Africans living in Europe, during the Middle Ages. Africans that conquered parts of Spain and Portugal, there are thousands of them there. So Europeans have been seeing Africans for centuries. So when Africa was colonized, Africa was rather repositioned in the global system. Africa used to trade in the international system, but during colonialism, all of African international trade was disrupted, and all of their trade was transformed to producers of raw resources. Producers of raw resources that is sent to the quote-unquote oppressor colony, oppressor country, mother country, called mother country, and those resources were refined there and industrialized. And then they would come back to Ghana and sell that same product for 10 times the value. They will go to different parts of the world and push that product for the value. But what is happening with the Sahel state is truly revolutionary, and I think many people aren't aware how revolutionary the Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and Senegal seem to be going on the same path. Revolutionary they are because, one, there's a professor, his name is, his name escaped me. He wrote a book called England and the Joseph Inakori, England and the Industrial Revolution. And he argues that there are two main ways to industrialize. One way is to industrialize, which the British did, was actually through international trade. And the other way is through the common economy, which Russia, the Soviet Union, and China has done. But to have common economy, you also need large territories. Africa has a large territory, but the territory isn't united. And when it comes to international trade, why international trade is so important for the West and how it's being disrupted in West Africa is that you need to have a market. Because if you produce certain things and you're industrialized, your domestic market is not enough to buy the products that you want to sell. You have to have a place to sell them. And what the West has done for the last 500 years is cause global destruction and annihilations and genocide to maintain those markets. And so what we're experiencing now with West Africa, trying to control their resources. So you have Burkina Faso taking over the gold mines. You have them taking over uranium. You have them taking over the resources. That is a threat to the West's way of life. And so the West right now, one of their major goals, right now they are fighting. So this gives Africa some opportunity to actually organize itself. And they will stop fighting eventually. And we see European nations now thinking about arming themselves. Where do you think they're going to use those arms after they stop fighting? They need a market. They need a market to get raw resources, and they need a market to sell them to. And with China growing in influence, the BRIC nation rising, it means they have to do something drastic if they want to maintain that position. And so we see what is happening in the United States as a manifestation of that we call it like concern. This idea of Donald Trump shifting things is really a way of the ruling class in the United States trying to maintain some wealth and resources. So we see two things happen in the United States where we don't know if they are arming themselves. The United States is talking about taking over the Panama Canal, talking about colonizing Canada and Greenland. Are they preparing for war? And who are they preparing for war against? You know, we should ask that question. So I don't think it would change. I think it's up to Africans to change it, because it's their wealth. Because you are attacking their wealth. And if I know anything about the United States and the West, they will kill you if you try to touch any of their wealth. So when the United States go into Iraq, these different parts of the world, they're concerned about their resources. So the United States would say, we go in there to protect our citizens and property. They are there to protect their wealth and their market. Because if that market is taken away, they will decline. So this decline is happening, and so they're not going to give it up easily. Is my answer, basically.
Thank you very much. We have another question, concern, comment. Okay, I'll ask another one of my questions then, and someone else may follow up. What responsibility, Dr. Nisbett, should the Christian church and the Islamic mosque take for their religiously enslavement systems, what responsibility should they take in terms of reparations? The Christian church with their Christian enslavement system, and prior to them, the Islamic mosque with their enslavement system. Should there be any responsibility that they take when it comes to reparations?
Yes, I would say yes. And actually, some churches have been taking responsibility. I can't think of the Methodist Church. Some Methodist Church, I know, have taken Catholic Church. Some parts of the Catholic Church have talked about issues of reparations. So the call for reparations, especially for CARICOM, and detail of their platform is they are not, although they have different calls, for CARICOM they are not calling for reparations from white people per se. They are calling for reparations for specific institutions that profited from the slave trade, including the states. So all of the states, African states that were affected by the transatlantic slave trade so much that no African state that were involved in the slave trade exists today. But if you look at the most powerful European states, they were involved in the slave trade. They were involved in colonialism, and that's not a coincidence. So yes, the church had responsibility. All of the religious establishments that contributed to injustice has a role to play in reparations. And reparations, I think, is a means or a way of changing and transforming the world in a positive way. Yes, we want conditions better for Africans, but the world that the European created on a global scale is a world where one person is at the top and somebody at the bottom. And we are calling for, in the traditional, radical Pan-African tradition, not to create a world where the African is on top and the European is at the bottom, but creating a world that is actually a world of equality. And we know that equality is hard to achieve, but this kind of world we have where, as I mentioned, Jeff Bezos having so much money he cannot spend, but yet people who work for him cannot even make a living wage, is not a world that any human being should tolerate. The church, the mosque, shouldn't be tolerating such a kind of system. I mean, we do not have to live in this system. And we are moving to a world that the West will not dominate the global system, and we have an opportunity to transform that world.
Thank you very much for the insightful response. Another question from the audience. Comment, observation. Yes, Nada.
I am happy that I got to meet the word reparation again, because I have gone for a conference that had reparation and then repatriation, where they talked about why Africans should be given that reparation. And then I saw it in your slides, and I really was happy to see that. But I want to also know if it still stands for them to still give us that, because I heard some time ago there was reparation from the Westerns to Ghana, where they brought some of our things that were stolen or were taken, our exploits, back to the Ashanti region and the rest. So I'm asking if we still are in need of that reparation, or reparation is just supposed to be just a one-time thing and then that's it.
No, I don't think it has to be just a one-time thing. But I think it's open up a dialogue. It's to open up a dialogue. It's something very hard to do. In a way, somebody has committed injustice to you, and many of the people who have committed that injustice intentionally did it. And we have Abio. He was a leader in Nigeria in the 1990s. He was demanding reparations. he eventually became president of of Nigeria. He was quickly, swiftly put into prison, and he died in jail. And we believe that this had to do with his call for reparations too. So the call for reparations is actually standing up to someone who right now is a very violent human being. This person these people are states commit genocide. They just wrapped up a genocide in Palestine. They have no problem killing children, 2-year-olds. They have no problems bombing hospitals and schools to make sure that their power and their wealth is maintained. So the conversation reparation we are asking them to have is actually something very bold and revolutionary, because we are asking this person who have committed so much crime for them, not for us to defeat them, but to tell them, you have committed this crime. We are asking you to ask forgiveness of your crime and have a discussion with us how we could help to bring you back to humanity. We are not trying to create a wall where we want you to have the same inhumanity that you have created all over the world. We want to create a wall where you could be human, but we have a discussion about it. So it's an ongoing conversation, but also you must look at what they are doing. Like, they brought some artifacts for the Ashanti Henny recently, but they created a law. So this is how criminal they are. The UK government created a law to say you cannot return stolen items back to the owners. So the items were returned, but they were loaned. So this is how criminal the thief is. He steals things and he creates a law on his own to say he cannot return something that he's stolen. So the Ashanti Henny, I think, asks a good question to King Charles and the UK. What kind of society defends a law that say you should not return something you have stolen? But to me, that showed a decadence of European states. And I think it will come out more and more as we go through this shift. But the European states are very much decadent, and they will not come to justice until the global order is changed, and the global order is changing, and so we are having a conversation to try to change that. But reparation, I think, is something ongoing. I think it's a dialogue and a discussion, and it's also a period of time to also find out more information and learn some more about what also happened, because some of the information were destroyed, some of it were pushed under the table and so forth. So it's a conversation to bring true healing to those affected, but also this reparation is for where people oftentimes look at reparation as only for the victims, but the reparation is also for Europeans. The reparation is for Europeans to also learn about their own history and what happened in this war. Because you have reparations, so for example, if European countries given reparations and you don't inform the citizens about what the reparation is about, the citizens might think, oh, we are giving money away or something, but you're not giving money away, you're actually giving back something that you have displaced and what you have done. You don't have enough money to pay back. So by us asking for a conversation for reparation to be beyond money, it's also saying we're trying to heal humanity. But it's an ongoing conversation.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm
Yes.
asking because I think, or I had a thought that if the people we are saying that cannot blame them because it's been years and we are supposed to have grown out of it. That is why I'm asking if reparation is just a one-time thing, or you're supposed to see to it that you do that till you exhaust all your options to, refund whatever that you stole or whatever that you did.
But, yes, but the crime is still continuing. The crime is still continuing. The injustices that they have done in the past, they continue to do it today. They are doing it as we speak. For example, Africans are fleeing different countries to go to Europe. In the UK, sometimes when Africans come to Europe, they tell Africans, why don't you go back to where you come from? And they say the Africans sometimes say, Asians even, and different people in different parts of the world, they say, we are here because you were there, as you went there. But the effects is still there. For example, Africans today, Europeans and the European Union are paying the Libyan government to imprison Africans in Libya. They are paying Libyans and not Africans, to go to the sea when they see a boat in the sea and bring it back to the continent and imprison the Africans there. The Europeans are paying, European Union, they are paying that. They're using rebel groups, yes. Yes. Yes, and we also see evidence of Europeans putting boats back into the sea. But also too, the most significant things that colonialism and slavery did. One, through the transatlantic slave trade, they were able to develop capitalism and industrialize. Those technologies that they develop, and Africans have helped develop in the West too, helped develop these technologies. Why don't they share those technologies with us? If they really want to help us, but yet, anytime any African that try to control their resources, they kill them. Name an African, even today, as we speak, name an African today that try to control their resources on the African continent, and they haven't taken part in killing that African, overthrowing that African. We learning recently even more the United States government and its role. When the United States government and its role in overthrowing Kwame Nkrumah, who wanted to industrialize the continent. Thomas Sankara, the CIA involvement, Gaddafi. I mean, name any leader that wanted to control the resources of Africa, and the West hasn't done their best to destroy that person. So they are doing it today still. And so yes, we have internal problems here on the continent that we have to deal with, but we also have external problems, and it's both. And we have to deal with both of them at the same time. We cannot say, oftentimes people say, let's deal with the issue here and not worry about the West. But they go hand in hand. Ghana and Africa have been in relationship for Europe for thousands of years. The impact is there, so you cannot say take them out when you constantly trade with them. You import and export with them constantly, so it's a relationship that is there, and the relationship is unequal. But also to what is not clear is that, to, I think, many of us is that, yes, some of our leaders here are corrupt, and some of them take resources, but they are partnering with Europeans to do that. And the Europeans the West get like 90% of the resources, they get 10. So even though you see them looking wealthy, their partners in crime are even much wealthier than them. So it's a relationship. So they try to put leaders oftentimes on the continent that support the Western objectives and keep the system the same. So I think that we cannot, it's not something that is distant and so far away. They're here. USAID is here. These different organizations are here. They're here to do certain things. And this is affect. So if Ghana create a law that it has a certain law, and the US and the West doesn't like that law, it uses operatives to try to undermine that law. And we see our leaders sometimes don't listen to what we say because they have the situation when you are a weaker country oftentimes in terms of a global system where you are not always beholden to your people. When election time come around, you do what the people want, but once you're in office, you also have some forces outside that could challenge your governing. So what the West often do is when you go into power, get into power and you want to change things, they put an embargo on you. We have Zimbabwe, the West put an embargo on Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was a country that the land was controlled mainly by Europeans. Africans believe that more Africans should have access to that land. And I think one of the ways to transform the world, I think, is that every human being should have access to land. Everybody should have access to land. Why do we have people owning land and not even using it? And other people cannot live, cannot survive. I think that every human being needs access to land. If you don't have a job, if you don't have certain things, you could at least have land where you could plant your own food and at least survive. At least survive so you could create a future for yourself. But if you have no land and you live in the city and you have to pay rent, how do you survive?
Thank you very much, Dr. Nisbett, for that insightful response. We have a question. I hope you have a few more moments because it's approaching 4 p.m. We have about 18 minutes before. There's a question online from, I think it's called Albie Walls. Her question is, are you concerned or do you see current and future generations being more individualistic? Can we unite or get restorative justice if we do not unite African peoples in their hearts and minds?
Oh, yes, I definitely think we need to unite African people in order for it to get better. In 2050, the population of the continent will reach 2.5 billion people. It is projected in the next 25 years, 2050, that one in every 4 human beings will be an African. So we face a crisis here, a common crisis on the continent, where we do not have enough jobs for these youths that are coming. But Africa is the youngest continent in the world. There's some estimates that 77% of the continent population, 77%, are under the age of 35. And that number is going to get higher. And so where are these youths going to work when this new generation come about? Do we have enough jobs for them? We don't have enough jobs now. We'll have enough, so we have a common crisis. What is happening in Europe is interesting. The opposite is happening in Europe. In parts of Europe, the population is actually going down. Usually, for population to maintain, you basically need, if you have a couple, you need to have 2 children to replace you if you pass away to maintain the population. If you are in Europe and you're having 1 child, no children, it will affect your population. So Europe, when it was like 2 years ago or so, Europe were panicking about these wave of immigrants coming to Europe. the African population in Europe is about 1%. 1%. The population of Europe, 1% African. And they are panicking. They were panicking about Africans coming. And I think it has to do with maybe Africans have a lot of children, more than they are. So they are, you have this issue where Donald Trump and others refer to the great replacement. This is the idea that white people will be replaced because the people of color are having more children than they are, and they are growing faster. So I think we need African unity, and so I think we need to, which I'm interested in working on, is actually how do we inform our youth? So I'm a lecturer at UCC, and when I teach, most youths have no idea about this global situation and this global inequality. I think that if most youths were aware of how the world is really structured and what is really going on, overnight there would be a revolution on the continent. But I think the mass media has a way of disseminating information that makes the West look a certain way, make the world look a certain way. And if we could educate the youths, because the information is there, but I think it's propaganda make it seems like it's not what it is. They have a saying, you say a lie enough time, people would believe it, So I think if you clearly show, if we as elders, if we clearly show the youths exactly what is happening, they will know what to do. Because if you look at revolutionary movements all over the world, especially the post-60s, name a revolution where the youths weren't at the forefront of those changes. Even today, you talk about the Arab Spring, the African Spring in Egypt, you talk about any movement, you talk about Burkina Faso in 2014, you talk about Senegal, the youths are at the forefront of it. But the youths need to be informed, I think, and go beyond the propaganda. So we have to be able to teach our youths what is happening. And I think the youths would push for change. But we need to find a way of reaching them. Because I think, as elders, I think we are not reaching them. Because in my classes, when I speak to the youth, they don't know a lot of what is happening. And they need to know this information. So yes, we need the youths. We need to inform and teach our youths.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone have a burning question or concern or observation they'd like to make? If not, I have one final question. Other questions I'll perhaps find some time to distract you from your work and talk offline. But this one I will ask online, literally and figuratively. What are your thoughts about our current leader of Ghana, his diplomatic visit to our neighbors in the Sahel, which is the site of the resurgence of Pan-Africanism? I ask because it's not getting much mainstream media attention in Ghana. You can find it online, but not a lot of people are talking about it. So I'm just curious about, given that being the site of the resurgence of Pan-Africanism, what are your thoughts about his diplomacy that is currently taking place?
I think it's good. I think it should be given more media coverage. I think it's good. And for me, from a Pan-Africanist point of view, I think we should support our leaders when they do things positive and critique our leaders when they do things negative. But I think the critique should focus on ideas and be careful of partisan politics. NPP, NDC, Christian versus Islam. Like, I think the main point is I think we all are Africans. And what we face affect us whether we are Christian, Muslim, whether we're NPP, NDC, whether we are male, female. All of these things affect us. And I think we need to unite, one, based on that. But I think what Mahama is doing in terms of going to a different country and speaking to different leaders is important. And I think that he has taken notice, is taking notice of when Traore was here. Mahama even acknowledged that he got the loudest applause. And he's very popular among the youth. So when I was at UCC campus and I was printing a flyer, and I printed some flyers, and the flyers had different images of different Pan-Africanists. And then one of the flyers I printed actually Traore on it. And the response I got, even at the printing shop, all of the youth saying, Traore, he's our man, he's our man. So he's gaining a lot of influence, and I think he's a model for the kind of leadership that we need. And I think Mahama is probably aware of his influence and aware of there's a move towards, as I'm arguing, towards Pan-Africanism and not just the lip service. I think that a lot of leaders have given lip service to Pan-Africanism, and no leader for me, for example, if you're living in French West Africa, or so-called French West Africa, or what they call Francophone Africa, which is Africa, are the parts that were colonized by French. No leader could come to power and not have issue with France. If you have a leader in French West Africa, so-called French West Africa, and they don't have a problem with France, I don't think they really have their people fully at heart. Because France, for example, with Niger, majority of people in Niger doesn't have access to electricity, but Niger is sending uranium to France that is helping them power their country so that they all have electricity. That uranium that France is taking, if it was used in Niger, everybody would have electricity. So how could you have a relationship with a country that's so outright so exploiting you? And so this isn't one country. This is happening just about every country on the continent when it comes to relations with the West. This is what they're doing. And we are not seeing it. We are not aware of it. Because we are not even talking about it. And they make sure we don't talk about it. And we are not aware of it. But every country in Africa, in some way or somehow, they are doing it to other African countries, including Ghana. And, and something has to be done about it. And I think educating the youth, we get it done. So, and I think this movement that is happening in the Sahel state, for me personally, the Sahel states are the strongest force of Pan-Africanism and true decolonization on the continent since the 1960s. It's the strongest force of African unification, African liberation on the continent right now. And that force that's on the continent right now is also under threat. Because if the Sahel spread to the continent, the whole global system will change. Africa would completely be transformed. So there are forces out there that intend to stop what is happening there. And Traore has been, I think, about 12 times they have attempted to assassinate him. But 24? It's increasing by the day. But what we need to do and learn from other revolution is that we need to educate our people and educate the youth. So what happened when they took out the leadership in Ghana? I saw a document, I have to check it, look at the source, but the person that took over when Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, the British government appointed someone, I heard, I don't know how true it is, I have to do my research on it, But the British government said the new person that they helped put in power after Nkrumah was overthrown, they said the man is quote unquote nice but stupid. And so I don't know how true this is. I have to do deeper research. But what we do see is when our leaders are overthrown, they make sure they place someone in power that is willing to do their bidding. So what we have to do is create awareness so that when they do, if they do overthrow our leader, we in place a new leader that is equally or even more radical in terms of transforming the continent, because so that it serves as a deterrent. Because they assassinate Patrice Lumumba, and who they put in power? Mobutu. Mobutu for the next 30 years had he could call the president of the United States anytime. 6 presidents at the White House. And then after the so-called Cold War ended, he couldn't get in touch with them, and then a couple of years later, he was overthrown. Same thing we had with Burkina Faso, our neighbor next door. Sankara was overthrown, Compaoré was put into power. Compaoré, when the people overthrew him in 2014, the French helped him to go to Ivory Coast, and he's now Ivory Coast living comfortable, while the people of Burkina Faso are asking for him to come back to be tried for the crimes that he committed for almost 30 years. But the French are still protecting him, so the injustices are still continuing. They're protecting a war leader that has persecuted, exploited his people for almost 30 years. And they come around telling us our leaders need to be more democratic, our leaders needs to be all of these things. Europe cannot speak to anybody about morality. So when Europe go and they're speaking about this and that, no one should ever listen to them. Because they have supported just recently genocide. And they have no remorse about it. And Donald Trump recently, he's talking about ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Completely, a country that claimed to be, people that claim to believe in democracy and justice, calling for ethnic cleansing of a people. Yes, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, let's give Dr. Nisbett a round of applause. We thank you very much for your visit to AUCB. And now we'll have some closing remarks by one of our students.
Before we close, I have a quick word, please.
Okay, yes, we have a
The
question.
issue of the youth we were talking about, incredible. And for that, tomorrow we have an event here, which everyone might see, talking about the youth and the power. And it's true. You can't see anybody beyond 25 who's leading any revolution. You have kids, you have house, you have school, you have whatever. So the youth, tomorrow we have Studoes and Black Messiah. This is, Van Hampton was 21 when he was killed, 21. From 18, he was running the Black Panther Party. But just imagine, when you guys were chasing Kelly they were feeding, they put all the gangs together, they were feeding like hungry people. This is incredible, at 21. And so this is the time that we can harness the power that we talk about. And don't take the power for granted. The university student is part of the 7% privilege in the world. 7% as a university student. You're going to use that power. Thanks so much for coming, brother.
Thank you for
And then we're expecting, you guys have to be action. And I'm hoping that with the call, you guys will start. David, look at Daniela, Abigail. And you guys, everybody, it's nice to see you involved in this. I hope you're talking about Achampo and everything. Because there's a place where Achampo in Jamaica.
Yes, there's a community, yes,
Yeah,
a moral community.
So we all connected like that. Thanks for coming, brother.
Oh, thank you. One last thing I would like to say also too, we have a UCC Pan-African platform, and I'll encourage you all to join. We try to create a community online of different students and elders, and we have conversation about Pan-Africanism. And you're encouraged to join. I'll Village, okay.
All right, that's a great presentation. Please let us give it up to him again. Let's give it up. First and foremost, we'd like to thank you, Dr. Mario Nisbett. Pardon me if I don't pronounce the name right. Okay. We appreciate your presence here. For you've enlightened us, you've inspired us. And it's just today I got to know this certain thing like Reparations. I didn't know, but because of today's presentation, I've got to know there's something like that. And interestingly, he's not here alone. He's not here alone. He's with his family. He's here with his family. Please, can you give us a wave? We acknowledge your presence here. I think after this presentation, I have to see him one-on-one. Sure. That's just by the way. And then to our community, we appreciate your time and your care. Maybe you'll be wondering, you've missing a session of this program or the previous ones, and then you'll be wondering how you can recap. I just urge you to log into your YouTube page and then search for Kwabena Nketia Center for Africana Studies, and then get everything, any program that is being held here, you get watch everything, each and every one of them. But please don't just watch and then leave, like and then subscribe to the channel so that we promote our community. Thank you here. Thank you once again. And I'm hoping to see you, as said, tomorrow's program, Judas and the Black Messiah. Thank you all for coming.